When pressure is applied, the masks come off for comfort. Mr. Purple Revolution has changed his name to Restoring Old America. You and I both know what that means. And the narcissism and the ego drive of whiteness and white supremacy, he wants expendable bodies. He wants people to put their bodies and their reputations and their lives on the line to restore something that he feels he has lost. In his words, we can deal with human rights at a later date, y'all. I'm being affected. I need people to follow me. I need to lead this revolution to restore America. Make America great again. That's what it means. Restoring old America is making America great again. It's the same thing. So I think now we can hang our hat on this and not talk about this man anymore.
Okay, first off, if you don't go follow NC Blue Dot, please do. I really enjoy her thoughtful contributions. Second of all is I was trying to decide if I was going to talk about the Purple Revolution, but I did talk up Brian when he first put out like a couple of videos. And I've been watching all the discourse and just really sitting with it and thinking about it. Because I'm very much somebody who, as somebody who deconstructed from Calvinism, I understand that the process of deconstruction is really messy and really ugly, and that whether it is a religious ideology or a political ideology, whether it is white supremacy, the patriarchy, whether it is a worship of capitalism, that is a slow and ugly process, and you have to give people time to go through it. And I think too many of us on the political left forget what it was like when we were going through that process, right? We don't really like to think back to what we were actually like early on that journey. And people have to start somewhere, right? People have to leave a cult somewhere. People have to take that first step and look at these issues that they maybe, especially if they're like a white dude in a conservative community, they've never faced these issues before and they're wrestling with them for the first time. And I guess as I watch this Purple Revolution discourse, some of the things that I keep thinking about is that I think it really does draw out the perfectionism on the political left, this desire for political purity and this expectation that people will have already arrived, or this expectation that people should be where you are, right? There's very little room for people to be in process. There's very little room for people to be deconstructing. And at the same time, I see people who are just starting on this journey who want to be welcomed with open arms and think that because they're like, I no longer support Donald Trump, that then trust should be extended to them even when they've caused real harm by the politics that they supported. And they still hold positions that are unsafe for vulnerable people in this country. So I guess when we're looking at people who are deconstructing and are leaving harmful ideologies, and they like want to oppose Trump, right? They're angry at what he's doing in this country. They're just starting to think about these issues for the first time. We have to be really clear that there should not be a requirement for people on the political left, especially if you are a vulnerable person who's been harmed by the beliefs and the voting and the rhetoric of people that are leaving MAGA. There should not be an expectation that we have to extend trust or be buddy-buddy with these people. I've said from the very beginning, right, that it doesn't actually require everybody leaving MAGA for us to stop fascism, but that there is a place for those of us who are more protected to have one-on-one relationships with our conservative relatives and neighbors. This is what AOC says. This is what my Congresswoman Maxine Dexter says. It is those conversations. It's the storytelling. It's the humanizing that changes hearts and minds. That's why we see progressive Democrats being willing to continually have dialogue with their Republican colleagues. We see people who are willing to take on the labor of kind of ministering to and potentially midwifing the political and emotional growth of MAGA as they, start to realize that Donald Trump has really fucked up this country and they don't know where to go next. But that labor should never, ever, ever be asked of the most vulnerable. It should never be put on marginalized groups to defend or partner, especially with white people who are leaving Trumperism, right? Or just not even leaving it, but like just starting to question and deconstruct. So I've seen kind of two different conversations happening around this issue. Because I think there is a need for people to honestly and openly, from a very deeply, deeply flawed position, still subsumed in a lot of right-wing rhetoric and indoctrination, to openly question Trump and to openly say, like, this is not good. This is not what I wanted. Where do I go from here? What does that look like? To start to peel back those layers. I think there is a space for people to do that on social media without getting absolutely torn to shreds, because they have not arrived at left-wing politics yet, because they have not even really begun to examine their racism and their misogyny. unfortunately, right, like we see white men on the left who have come to leftist politics because they've been hurt by capitalism. And they have just as much racism and misogyny as people on the political right who are starting to realize that they are being fucked over by the billionaires and capitalism is hurting them too, right? White men come to class consciousness without necessarily having to unpack their racism and their misogyny. That is not something that is exclusive to people on the political right. We've seen over and over and over white men on the far political left who are not safe for women, and they're not safe for any minorities. They're not safe for disabled folks. They're not safe for children, right? This is not a unique issue. This is not a unique issue in our society. So I guess I just wanted to acknowledge that in this conversation. But watching Purple Revolution struggle with these concepts and try and wrestle with these ideas for the very first time, and then the internet doing what it does, and then his response be to change his name to Restoring Old America, which is, if your temptation is reactionary, if your temptation is to want to go back to a previous period in history when you felt more secure and powerful, more prosperous, like that's always a red flag. If your impetus is to take up a reactionary position, restoring old America, make America great again, looking back on the past with rose-colored glasses and wanting to just glom on to the things that made you more prosperous and powerful, that should always be a red flag. And as I'm watching this whole conversation unfold, I just keep thinking about, is there the potential for people to have the space to deconstruct publicly, but not to try and lead a revolution, not to try and be at the forefront? Because I think, when I look back on my own process of unpacking my Calvinist past and trying to work through all of that, the minute I decided to leave the church, I wasn't like, hey, I am now going to set myself up as an expert on deconstruction. No, it was, I need to sit in a position of learning and listening to people who have walked this journey, who are much farther along in this journey. I need to have a posture of humility, a posture of like, I'm here to peel back the layers. I am here to unlearn, and I'm here to grow. This is not my time to be leading. This is my time to be unlearning and listening. People need to deconstruct. People need to leave the cult. People are going to be going through that process. And they're going to think like, wow, I'm so much more enlightened than I was a month ago. I have jettisoned so many harmful beliefs and concepts. They don't really realize how much more there is to unpack yet, how much more there is to unlearn until they go through that process bit by bit by bit. I realize this is not like a fully formed thesis here. These are just these kind of disjointed things that I've been thinking about as I'm watching everybody discuss this issue. How do we form broad-based coalitions to topple fascism? Looking at what worked in countries like Chile, where people on the political right and the political left, unions, grassroots groups got together to stop Augusto Pinochet. They didn't agree on anything, but they agreed that they would vote no, and they would get all their neighbors to vote no. We know from the lessons of history that it takes diverse groups of people who form a coalition around one discrete purpose, and they don't trust each other for anything else. They don't have to like each other. How do we do that in this country? But at the same time, number one rule of effective resistance is that you protect the most vulnerable. So as we're looking at people leaving MAGA, and they are going to bring their racism and their misogyny with them, they're going to bring a lot of baggage and a lot of really potentially harmful positions with them. How do we continue to protect the most vulnerable in that process? I just think it's really messy. It's not so neat and tidy as I've seen people want to make it out to be on 60, 90-second videos on TikTok. Deconstruction is real messy. It's real ugly. It's real ugly. You have to face your own ugliness, right? You have to face the harm that you've done and the positions that you previously held that have hurt people. I do think it takes a lot of bravery for somebody to say, I was wrong. I want to work to fix that. But then the rest of us have to not want to make that person the face of the revolution when they should be in a position of humility, a posture of learning, of growth. And I also think, how can we apply a restorative justice lens to this whole issue? Because this is something we're going to be wrestling with as a country for many, many years. This is going to become more and more of an issue as MAGA unravels. It's not ex-MAGA saying, I'm here, let me in. The people who have been harmed get to say, this is what restoration looks like. This is what it looks like to right the wrongs and to build trust. And also maybe low-key, I'm not ever going to really trust you, and you have to be okay with that. I don't know. I know it's tempting to say, let's move on from this issue, but I think this is something we're going to be dealing with a lot more. How do we do that in a healthy and restorative way that protects people? What would that look like, and how would we all, from every position of this current Purple Revolution issue, how would we handle this differently next time? Because I do think more and more people are going to be leaving MAGA, more and more people are going to be deconstructing. It will be messy, and there will be a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of distrust. So what does it look like to handle that? I definitely don't have the answers. These are just things I've been thinking through.